welcome back to Digging in the Bible. Today we're continuing our trip through Genesis. We're in Genesis chapter 4, and we're going to pick up in verse 17. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. When he built a city, he called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. Well, that sounds great. Have your child, you've killed your brother. Now you're having your son, you're going to build a city. Well, name the city after your son. Yeah, makes sense. Sure, fair enough. And we continue. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad fathered Mahujael, and Mahujael fathered Methushael, and Methushael fathered Lamech, and Lamech took two wives. Uh, I personally think Lamech was a little foolish. He took two wives. Now, this is an interesting thing. A little more of a normal practice in Old Testament times like this. We see this come up in various things. It's kind of somewhat of a difficult thing to have conversation with your kids. If your kids are younger, probably don't dwell on this much. But is this the ideal for marriage? I don't think that is what God has put out there as the ideal for marriage, but in the Old Testament, there were allowances for this, or there appear to be allowances for this. Here, there's no recommendation. It's just factually stating, yeah, Lamech took two wives. Okay, I guess that's it. The name of one was Adah, and the name of the other was Zillah. Adah bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. So what you start noticing here is the different early figures set the stage. Their behavior, the way in which they function, the things they develop skills at, become key skills that mark those that follow them. So in this case, well, his descendants, Jabal or Jabel, or however you pronounce the name, I don't 100% know, sorry. His descendants are ones that live in tents. They handle livestock. This is the same kind of a thing where you have today, if your dad was a lawyer, you might be more inclined to become a lawyer. If your mom was a doctor, you might be more inclined to become a doctor. I know all sorts of church worker kids who go into church work. I mean, that's the kind of a thing that happens. We go into the professions that we're familiar with, and we go into these a lot of times because those are the things that our parents did. Well, this has been happening since the beginning, but in this sense, it sets the tone for larger groups of people that come out of the particular. So it's like the tribes that follow from particular early figures within their lives. So there's kind of the patriarchs of the varying tribes. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all those who play the lyre and pipe. So there's musicians on that side of the family, I guess. Zilha also bore Tubal-Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron, so he works with metal. The sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. Lamech said to his two wives, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice, you wives of Lamech. Listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. And he just drops this. Interesting, not much really explained here. But apparently that was something that took place in his life where he has killed a man for wounding him. So you start to see patterns develop. I mean, this is what we see in Old Testament passages like this, patterns developing in which one generation to the next, well, if Cain did, Cain took offense at what Abel did, well, Lamech, a couple generations later, well, he's saying, look, if Cain did this and he gets punished, well, you know what? Here's what I've done. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, here's what Cain went after and killed Abel for what he did. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, Lamech's is 77-fold. In other words, his response is far greater to what the offense was. So you kind of see the snowball effect of sin within the generations succeeding from Cain. So in this portion of the chapter, you have kind of the next couple of generations of those that did evil in the land. And then we shift gears, but it's a shorter section. finishing off chapter 4, picking up at verse 25, and Adam knew his wife again. Okay, so we're jumping back to Adam. So after you have Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve, his wife, have kids again. And she bore a son and called his name Seth. For she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. To Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. At the time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. So you have a godly line coming from Adam and Eve through Seth and through Enosh. We don't have further explanation yet at this point, and we don't have further expounding upon who else the generations were involved. So you kind of have parallel tracks here. You could look at a sequence like this and say, wow, there was all these generations, and then we come back to Adam, and he's having another kid. Wow, he must be old. And yes, we'll get into this in the next chapter about the ages of varying people at this time. But the reality is that what's happening here is you have one side of the story, and then we come back and we tell the other side of the story. So we have those that did evil, following Cain, and those that did good, who, and here's how it says again, called upon the name of the Lord. So Seth and his descendants were ones that called upon the name of the Lord, those that followed God. And what's interesting with this is you notice throughout Scripture, and this is hopefully a theme we'll pick up on, is the way in which there's kind of often these diversions where you have some who will continue to follow God and others that will go after sin. And God is always working to preserve. Some of the time we talk about this as a remnant. This is an early situation like this where God is preserving a portion of humanity. So you have Cain and Abel. Cain goes down the direction of evil. Abel perhaps would have followed God further and was at the time, but instead now Seth and his descendants do the same. When we come back again, we will pick up in chapter 5 and get into Adam's descendants until the time of Noah. So God bless, and I will talk to you next week.